The candles flickered violently as the doors to the Ashworth ballroom crashed open, and every head turned toward the man who stood in the entrance, like a storm given human form. Vespera Hale pressed deeper into the shadows beside the marble column, her gloved fingers tightening around the glass of watered champagne she had not been offered, but had quietly taken from a passing tray. She was not supposed to be here, not truly. She was a companion, a shadow, a paid presence meant to make Lady Sophronia Crestwell appear more gracious by comparison. And yet here she stood, watching the Duke of Ashworth stride into his own grandmother's selection ball with the expression of a man who had already decided to burn the entire evening to ash. Theron Blackwood was not handsome in the way the poets described. His features were too sharp, his jaw too severe, his blue eyes too cold. A scar traced the edge of his left cheekbone, pale against sun-darkened skin, the origin of which spawned a dozen whispered rumors. Some said a duel. Others claimed a war wound from his years commanding men in foreign campaigns. A few, always speaking behind fans and closed doors, suggested something darker still. What no one disputed was the fear he inspired. The Duke had returned from the continent 3 months ago to claim his title after his father's sudden death. In that time, he had rejected 10 noble ladies presented by his grandmother, the Dowager Duchess. 10 carefully selected daughters of earls and marquesses and viscounts. 10 women with impeccable bloodlines and considerable fortunes. All 10 had left Ashworth House in tears. Tonight was supposed to be different. Tonight, the Dowager had gathered the remaining eligible ladies of the season for one final attempt. Vespera had counted 14 young women in silk and diamonds, each more beautiful than the last, each watching the Duke with a mixture of terror and desperate hope. He surveyed them now, those cold eyes moving from face to face with the detached assessment of a man examining horses at auction. No one spoke. No one breathed. Then Lady Sophronia stepped forward, her golden curls catching the candlelight, her rose-colored gown cut to display her considerable assets to maximum effect. She curtsied with practiced grace. "Your Grace, what an honor to finally make your formal acquaintance. I am Lady Sophronia Crestwell, daughter of the Earl of I know who you are." His voice was low, rough, carrying the weight of gravel and winter. "You wrote my grandmother 14 letters in 7 weeks detailing your qualifications, as if applying for a position as my steward." Sophronia's face flushed crimson. A ripple of whispered shock moved through the assembled ladies. "I meant no offense, Your Grace. I simply wished to express your ambition." He cut her off without raising his voice. "It is noted," and declined. The Duke turned to his grandmother, the Dowager Duchess, who sat enthroned in a chair that might as well have been made of iron and ice. She was ancient, silver-haired, with the same cold blue eyes her grandson had inherited. "This is what you offer me." Theron gestured toward the assembly. "Fortune hunters and title chasers? Women who see the Ashworth name as a prize to be won?" "These are the finest ladies of the season," the Dowager said, her voice thin but sharp as a blade. "Any one of them would make a suitable duchess." "Suitable." The word dripped with contempt. "I have had enough of suitable." "Then what do you want?" The Dowager's patience cracked, revealing the steel beneath. "You have rejected every woman I have presented. You refuse to attend the season's events. You hide in your study with your maps and your war correspondence while this family's future withers. Tell me, grandson, what exactly would satisfy you?" The ballroom held its breath. Theron Blackwood turned slowly, his gaze sweeping once more across the gathered nobility. It passed over the diamond-draped daughters, the silk-wrapped heiresses, the desperate faces of women who had been told their entire lives that a duke was the highest prize. Then his eyes stopped. On her. On Vespera, hiding in the shadows beside the marble column, wearing a borrowed dress 3 seasons out of fashion, holding champagne she had stolen. She felt the weight of his attention like a physical blow. Her heart stuttered. Her mouth went dry. "Her," he said. The word dropped into the silence like a stone into still water. "Your Grace?" The dowager's voice carried genuine confusion. "I don't understand. Who are you? The one in the shadows." Theron strode forward, and the crowd parted before him like water before the prow of a ship. "The one none of you noticed. The one no one chose." He stopped 3 feet from Vespera, close enough that she could see the silver threading through his dark hair at the temples, could smell cedar and smoke and something metallic that might have been old blood. "Who are you?" he asked. Vespera's voice emerged as barely a whisper. "No one, Your Grace. I am no one." Wrong answer. His lips curved into something that was not quite a smile. "Tonight, you become someone." He turned back to his grandmother, leaving Vespera frozen in place. "You wanted to know what I want. I want the one no one else wanted. The one standing in corners while your precious heiresses parade. The one who knows what it means to be overlooked." "This is madness," the dowager breathed. "Perhaps." Theron's eyes glittered with something dangerous. "But she is my choice. Inform the household. My future Duchess has arrived." And before Vespera could protest, before she could explain that this was impossible, that she was a paid companion with no fortune and no family, and no right to even be in this room, the feared Duke of Ashworth offered her his hand. Every eye in the ballroom burned into her skin. She had 2 choices: take his hand and step into a world that would devour her whole, or refuse and spend the rest of her life wondering what might have been. Vespera looked at his outstretched palm, scarred and calloused, the hand of a soldier rather than a lord. Then she looked into his eyes and saw something she did not expect. Desperation. Buried deep beneath the ice, but unmistakably there. He needed her. She did not know why. She did not know for what purpose. But in that moment, Vespera Hale made the most dangerous decision of her life. She took his hand. The Duke's grip was iron wrapped in warmth, inescapable without being cruel. He pulled her forward, out of the shadows, into the blazing light of 100 candles and twice as many horrified stares. "Your Grace." Lady Sophronia's voice cut through the stunned silence, sharp with barely controlled fury. "Surely this is a jest. That woman is my companion, a servant. She has no breeding, no fortune, and no ambition?" Theron released Vespera's hand, but remained close, his presence a shield between her and the circling wolves. No desperate letters cataloging her virtues. No scheming relatives negotiating her dowry in back rooms while pretending to discuss the weather? Sophronia's mouth opened and closed like a fish pulled from water. "I know what she is not." The Duke's voice carried to every corner of the ballroom. "What I wish to discover is what she is." The dowager rose from her throne, and despite her age, despite the cane she gripped with white-knuckled fingers, she commanded the room simply by standing. "Theron." She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. "A word. In private. Whatever you wish to say, grandmother, you may say here. I will not." The battle of wills lasted 3 heartbeats. Then, to Vespera's surprise, the Duke inclined his head. "Very well." He turned to Vespera, and for the first time, his voice softened by a fraction. "Wait here. Do not leave this room. Do not speak to anyone who approaches you with questions or offers of friendship. They are neither friendly nor questioning in good faith." Before she could respond, he strode toward the far doors, the dowager following with surprising speed for a woman her age. The doors closed behind them, and Vespera was alone with the wolves. Lady Sophronia descended first, her two closest companions flanking her like generals preparing for siege. Well, Sophronia's smile was a knife wrapped in silk. The little mouse finally found her voice, or rather, found a man desperate enough to give her one. "I did not ask for this," Vespera said quietly. "I do not know why he chose me." "Of course you do not." Sophronia circled her slowly, examining her borrowed dress, her simple hairstyle, her lack of jewels. "You are nothing. A charity case my mother took in because your father gambled away your family's modest fortune before drinking himself into the grave." The words landed like blows, but Vespera did not flinch. She had heard worse, had lived worse. "His Grace will tire of this game within the week," Sophronia continued. "Whatever point he is trying to make to his grandmother, it will not last. And when it ends, you will be dismissed, without references, without prospects, without even the modest position you currently hold. Then you have nothing to fear from me." Sophronia's eyes narrowed. "I fear nothing from creatures like you. I simply wish you to understand your place before you begin imagining you might actually become a duchess." "Ladies," a new voice interrupted, bright and warm and utterly unexpected. "How delightful to see you welcoming my brother's guest so graciously." A young woman swept into their midst, dark-haired and laughing-eyed, wearing a gown of midnight blue that made her look like a piece of the evening sky given human form. She was perhaps 19, with the same sharp features as the Duke, but softened by youth and an obvious capacity for joy he entirely lacked. "Lady Sabienne," Sophronia's voice cooled to Arctic temperatures. "I was not aware you had returned from the country." "Just this afternoon. Perfect timing, as it turns out." Sabienne linked her arm through Vespera's with startling familiarity. "I see my brother has finally made his choice. How wonderful. We have so much to discuss." Before Sophronia could respond, Sabienne pulled Vespera away, guiding her toward a quiet alcove near the windows overlooking the darkened gardens. "Breathe," Sabienne instructed. "You look like you are about to faint, and while that would be dramatic, it would not help your position." "I do not have a position." Vespera's voice shook despite her efforts to control it. "I do not understand what is happening. I was supposed to be invisible tonight. I was supposed to stand in corners and fetch lemonade and ensure Lady Sophronia appeared gracious by comparison. Yes, well, my brother has never done anything the expected way." Sabienne's smile was conspiratorial. "Do you know why he rejected those 10 ladies? Because he is cruel? Because he finds pleasure in humiliation? Because they were liars." Sabienne's voice softened. "Every single one of them performed a version of themselves designed to appeal to what they thought a duke would want. Demure when they were ambitious, sweet when they were calculating, agreeable when they had opinions they were trained to swallow. And he saw through them. Theron spent 6 years commanding men in the Crimean conflicts. He learned to read people the way others read books. One glance, and he knows if you are lying, if you are afraid, if you are hiding something." Sabienne studied Vespera with new interest. What did he see when he looked at you? Vespera thought of that moment, his eyes finding hers across the crowded ballroom. The shock of being seen, the strange, desperate recognition. "I do not know." "Neither do I, and that is what makes this interesting." Sabienne squeezed her arm. "My grandmother will try to destroy this arrangement. Sophronia will scheme. Half the ton will decide you are either a fortune hunter or a madwoman. But if you can survive the next month, If you can prove you are exactly what you appear to be, something real might come of this. What do I appear to be? Sabienne considered the question. Honest. Overlooked. Unbroken despite everything that has tried to break you. She smiled. My brother has been broken for a very long time. Perhaps he recognized a kindred spirit. The doors opened, and the Duke emerged, his expression darker than before. His grandmother did not follow. He crossed the ballroom in long strides, ignoring the whispers that rose like smoke in his wake. We are leaving, he said when he reached them. Miss Hale, you will accompany us to Ashworth House tonight. Tonight? Vespera's voice pitched higher than she intended. But my belongings, my position with Lady Sophronia, I cannot simply— Your belongings will be sent for. Your position with Lady Sophronia ended the moment I spoke your name. You have no obligations remaining in this room. I have not agreed to anything. The Duke stopped. Something flickered in his cold eyes. Surprise, perhaps. Or interest. No, he said slowly. You have not. He studied her with new attention, as if seeing her clearly for the first time. Then let us discuss terms, he said. Not here. Not surrounded by people who wish us both ill. Come to Ashworth House. Hear what I am proposing. If you decide the arrangement does not suit you, I will personally ensure you are placed in a position far superior to the one Sophronia offered. And if I refuse to come at all, then you walk out of this ballroom and return to a life where you are invisible, overlooked, and slowly suffocating under the weight of being nothing to no one. The cruelty of it stole her breath, but beneath the harsh words, she heard something else. Truth. He was not lying to her. He was not softening reality to make it palatable. He was showing her exactly what her options were and trusting her to choose. When had anyone ever trusted her with a choice? One conversation, she said. I will hear your proposition, but I make no promises beyond that. The Duke's expression did not change, but something in his posture shifted. Relief, perhaps, or satisfaction. One conversation, he agreed. The carriage is waiting. He offered his arm with formal precision, and Vespera took it, hyper-aware of the muscle beneath the fine wool of his jacket, the controlled strength he held carefully in check. Behind them, the ballroom erupted into furious whispers. Ahead of them, a future she could not imagine waited in the darkness. The carriage bearing the Ashworth crest was larger than the room Vespera had been sleeping in for the past 3 years. Black lacquered wood with silver fittings, drawn by 4 matched horses the color of midnight. A footman in immaculate livery handed her up as if she were already a duchess rather than a penniless companion whose entire wardrobe fit in a single trunk. Inside, oil lamps cast warm light across burgundy velvet seats and polished mahogany panels. Sabienne settled across from her, still smiling that knowing smile. The Duke sat beside his sister, his long legs stretched toward Vespera in a way that made the spacious carriage feel suddenly intimate. The door closed. The horses began to move. Before we discuss terms, Theron said, I require honesty, complete and absolute. Can you provide that? I have nothing to hide, Your Grace. Everyone has something to hide. His voice carried no judgment, simply fact. But I don't need your secrets. I need to know that when you speak to me, you speak truth. Even when the truth is uncomfortable. Even when a lie would be easier. Vespera considered his words. You rejected those 10 ladies because they lied to you. I rejected them because they lied to themselves first, then to me second. They had been trained from birth to become whatever a man required, to suppress their own thoughts and desires until nothing genuine remained. His jaw tightened. I will not marry a mirror. I will not wake every morning beside a woman who reflects back only what she believes I wish to see. And you think I'm different? I think you have never been given the luxury of performance." His gaze held hers. "When you are invisible, there is no one to perform for. You have had no choice but to be yourself, even when that self was dismissed and overlooked." The accuracy of his assessment unsettled her more than anything that had come before. "What exactly are you proposing, Your Grace?" "A temporary arrangement." Sabienne leaned forward, unable to contain her enthusiasm. "You would stay at Ashworth House as my guest and companion. In public, Theron would court you with appropriate attention. The Tun would believe he has finally chosen a potential bride. And in private, you would have no obligations beyond maintaining the appearance of suitability." Theron's voice remained carefully neutral. "No expectations of intimacy, no pressure toward actual marriage. Simply a performance designed to satisfy my grandmother's demands, while I resolve certain matters that require time and freedom from her interference." Vespera's mind raced through the implications. "You wish to use me as a shield. I wish to use this arrangement as breathing room." His honesty was almost brutal. "My grandmother believes I must marry immediately to secure the Ashworth line. She has been relentless since my father's death, parading candidates through this house like cattle at market. I need her to stop. I need time to grieve, to assume my responsibilities properly, to determine what I actually want from the remainder of my life. And when you determine that, when you are ready to marry someone of actual standing, the arrangement ends, quietly and with discretion. You would be positioned as a dear friend of my sister's, who decided we did not suit. No scandal would touch you." The carriage swayed as they turned onto a broader avenue. Through the window, Vespera glimpsed Ashworth House rising against the night sky, a massive structure of pale stone and glowing windows, larger than any home she had ever entered. "Why me?" she asked suddenly. "Truly, you could have chosen anyone in that room, someone with at least modest standing, someone whose presence would not invite quite so much scandal. Why the one no one chose?" The Duke was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice had lost some of its cold edge. "My father married for duty first, the woman my grandmother selected for him. She was suitable in every way. Beautiful, connected, accomplished. She was also miserable every day of her marriage, and she made him miserable in turn. They endured 30 years of polite hatred before she died, in a carriage accident that some say was not entirely accidental." Vespera's breath caught. "I watched my father after her death," Theron continued. "He did not mourn. He did not grieve. He sat in his study and said, 'Perhaps now I can finally breathe.' 6 months later, he married a widow of no particular standing, a woman with no fortune, no connections, no value to anyone in the Tun. She made him laugh. She challenged his opinions. She was real in ways his first wife never allowed herself to be. What happened to her? She died giving birth to Sabienne. The doctors were forced to choose between mother and child." His voice flattened. "My father never recovered. He spent his remaining years grieving a woman he had loved for only 8 years, but who had given him more happiness than 30 years of suitable marriage." The carriage stopped. They had arrived, but neither Theron nor Vespera moved. "I do not expect love from this arrangement," he said. "I am not capable of it. I am not certain I ever will be. But I refuse to enter a marriage built on performance and ambition. If I must marry, eventually, I will choose someone who is genuine. Someone who sees me as I am, not as a title to be acquired. And in the meantime, you need someone to occupy the position so your grandmother ceases her campaign." "Yes." The footman opened the door. Cold night air rushed in. 3 conditions, Vespera said. Theron's eyebrow rose. You negotiate with me. You said you require honesty. Honest people state their terms clearly. A ghost of something crossed his features. Amusement, perhaps. Or respect. Name them. First, my brother must be informed, properly and truthfully. Eamon is reckless, but he loves me, and he will worry himself into foolishness if he believes I have been taken advantage of. Done. I will write to him personally. Second, when this arrangement ends, I want the means to support myself, not charity. A genuine position with genuine prospects. Something that allows me to build a life, rather than simply survive within someone else's. Sabian will see to it. She has more connections than half the peerage combined. And third, Vespera met his eyes directly. The moment you decide to pursue someone genuinely, this ends immediately. I will not be kept as a convenience while you conduct a real courtship in the shadows. I may be poor, Your Grace, but I am not a fool, and I will not be made to look like one. Silence stretched between them. Then Theron extended his hand, just as he had in the ballroom. You have my word. All 3 conditions, honored without exception. Do we have an agreement? Vespera looked at his scarred palm, the hand of a soldier who had seen things that still haunted his cold eyes. She thought of her father, who had gambled everything and lost. She thought of her mother, who had died trying to hold the pieces together. She thought of every door that had closed in her face. Then she took his hand. We have an agreement. His grip tightened once, brief and warm, sealing a bargain that would change everything. What Vespera did not see was the Dowager Duchess watching from an upstairs window as the carriage arrived. She did not see the cold calculation in the old woman's eyes, or the way her fingers tightened on the handle of her cane. She did not hear the words the Dowager spoke to the shadows behind her. Find out everything about this girl, every secret, every weakness, every crack in her foundation. A voice responded from the darkness. And when I do, then we destroy her before she destroys everything I have built. The war had only just begun. Morning arrived at Ashworth House wrapped in gray light and the distant sound of rain against glass. Vespera woke in a bed larger than any she had ever occupied, surrounded by silk hangings, the color of deep wine, and furniture that cost more than her father had earned in his best year of business. For a long moment, she simply lay there, staring at the canopy above her, trying to convince herself that she had not dreamed the previous evening, that she was actually here, in a duke's house, wearing borrowed nightclothes that probably cost more than her entire wardrobe. A soft knock preceded a young maid with copper hair and nervous eyes. Miss Hale? I'm Dinah. Lady Sabian sent me to attend you. Her Grace has requested your presence in her sitting room. Her Grace. The Dowager Duchess. Vespera's stomach tightened. When? As soon as you are presentable, miss. Dinah helped her dress in a gown of soft dove gray, simple but beautifully made. The fabric whispered against her skin like a secret. In the mirror, Vespera barely recognized herself. Same dark hair, same gray-green eyes, same face that had never launched ships or inspired poetry. But the dress transformed her silhouette, gave her presence she had never possessed. The Dowager's sitting room occupied the eastern corner of the house, flooded with gray light despite the rain. Inside, everything gleamed with age and authority. The Dowager herself sat beside a window, her silver hair swept into an elaborate arrangement, her black mourning dress immaculate. Close the door, she said. Sit. Vespera obeyed, choosing a chair opposite the older woman. My grandson believes you are different from the others, the Dowager said. He believes your invisibility has made you genuine in ways their visibility prevented. He is wrong. You know this after 5 minutes in my company? I know this because I have watched girls like you my entire life. The overlooked daughters, the poor relations, the companions who dream of rising above their station. You are not genuine. You are simply desperate in a different way. The words landed like physical blows, but Vespera did not flinch. You may be right, Your Grace. That surprised the Dowager. Her cup paused halfway to her lips. You admit it. I admit that desperation shapes people, that poverty forces choices the comfortable cannot imagine, that I would not be sitting in this room if I had other options. Vespera met the older woman's gaze directly. But desperation and dishonesty are not the same thing. I have told your grandson exactly what I am. I have made no claims to nobility or fortune or standing I do not possess. And yet you accepted his proposition. Because the alternative was returning to a life where I slowly disappeared entirely. Given the choice between vanishing and taking a risk, I chose the risk. The Dowager set down her teacup with a sharp click against saucer. My grandson is not well. Not in body, though the war damaged him in ways the doctors cannot fully address. In spirit, in whatever mechanism allows a person to feel rather than simply function. Vespera remained silent, sensing the shift in conversation. His father's death broke something in him. They were not close, you understand. There was too much distance between them, too many years of silence and disappointment. But when the end came, Theron was hundreds of miles away, receiving reports about supply lines, while his father took his final breath. He did not reach him in time. He did not reach him at all. The letter informing him of his father's death crossed paths with his own letter, announcing his intention to finally come home, to repair what had fractured between them. The Dowager's voice hardened. My son died believing Theron cared nothing for him. And Theron knows it. The weight of that revelation pressed against Vespera's chest. That is not something I can fix, Your Grace. No, it is not. But you could make it worse. The Dowager leaned forward, her blue eyes sharp as winter ice. You could make him believe there is genuine connection where none exists. You could let him trust you, confide in you, depend on you for the companionship he has denied himself since returning home. And when the arrangement ends, when you walk away with your references and your connections and your improved prospects, you could leave him more damaged than you found him. That is not my intention. Intentions mean nothing. Results are everything. The Dowager gripped her cane, knuckles white. I will not watch a desperate girl with nothing to lose tear apart what remains. Vespera stood, surprising herself with the steadiness of her voice. Then we understand each other, Your Grace. You believe I will hurt him. I believe I will not. Time will prove which of us is correct. The Dowager studied her for a long moment. Something shifted in her expression. Not warmth, not approval, but perhaps a grudging acknowledgement. You have more spine than I expected. I have survived more than you know. One final thing, Miss Hale. My grandson is not the only one watching you. I have resources at my disposal that would make your darkest secrets look like children's games. If there is anything in your past that would bring scandal to this house, I will find it. Then you will find only poverty and loss and the unremarkable suffering of people who do not matter to society. Nothing scandalous, nothing worth hiding. Simply a life that was not worth living until your grandson decided to make it interesting. The Dowager paused at the door. We shall see, she said. And then she was gone, leaving Vespera alone with her cold tea and the unsettling realization that she had just been given both a warning and an opening. In the hallway outside, the Dowager paused beside a shadow that moved. Well, she said. She is who she claims, the shadow answered. Father died in debt. Mother followed within the year. brother is a minor clerk with gambling tendencies, but no significant debts. There is nothing to use against her. The dowager's lips thinned. Then we must create something. That is a dangerous path, Your Grace. All paths are dangerous. This one simply serves my purposes. She walked on, her cane tapping against marble with the rhythm of war drums. The library at Ashworth House stretched across the entire western wing. 3 stories of books connected by spiral staircases and narrow balconies. Ladders on brass rails allowed access to the highest shelves. Reading alcoves with velvet cushions invited hours of comfortable study. The smell of old paper and leather bindings wrapped around Vespera like an embrace. She had discovered it on her 3rd day, escaping from another of Sabienne's enthusiastic planning sessions about gowns and social calendars. Now, 5 days into her residence, it had become her sanctuary. You are here again. The Duke's voice came from somewhere above. Vespera looked up to find him descending one of the spiral staircases, a thick volume tucked under his arm. You said I could use the library, Your Grace. I said you could read anything you wished. I did not expect you to take up permanent residence. But his voice carried no censure. If anything, it held something like approval. He reached the main floor and moved toward the central table where maps were spread across dark wood. His maps. Military formations and supply routes and terrain analyses that he still studied, despite the war being over. What are you reading? He asked, without looking up. Herodotus, the Persian Wars. She held up the leather-bound volume. Your collection is extraordinary. My grandfather's obsession. He believed understanding history prevented repeating it. Theron's lips curved slightly. He was wrong, of course. We repeat it regardless. But the books remain useful. Vespera approached the table, curious despite herself. The maps showed territory she did not recognize, mountainous regions marked with symbols and annotations in Theron's precise handwriting. Where is this? The Crimean Peninsula, specifically the valley where my regiment held position for 7 months against forces that outnumbered us 3-1. His finger traced a line through the mountains. This pass was supposed to be reinforced. The reinforcements never came. What happened? We held anyway. He said it simply, without pride or bitterness. 200 men went in. 43 walked out. The casual horror of those numbers struck her silent. You were one of the 43. Obviously. How? Theron looked at her then, his cold eyes assessing. Most people did not ask. Most people preferred comfortable ignorance, pleasant conversation, topics that did not remind them that the men they danced with had watched friends die screaming. Because I learned to make impossible choices quickly, he said. Because I was willing to sacrifice some so others might survive. Because war rewards ruthlessness, and I discovered I possessed it in abundance. You make yourself sound monstrous. Perhaps I am. Vespera studied his face, the sharp features. The scar she now knew came from shrapnel during a siege, the shadows beneath eyes that probably did not sleep enough. Monsters do not mourn the men they lost. They do not study maps of battles long finished, trying to understand what might have gone differently. Something flickered in his expression. Surprise, perhaps, or recognition. You see more than most people. I learned to watch. When you are invisible, watching is all you have. She returned to her chair by the window, but did not open her book. Your grandmother informed me that you blame yourself for your father's death. His jaw tightened. My grandmother speaks too freely. She speaks to protect you. Badly, perhaps. But the intention is there. Theron was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice had lost some of its edge. I was going to ask his forgiveness for the years of silence, for choosing the army over the title, for being everything he disapproved of. He moved to the window, standing beside her chair, but looking outward at the rain-gray gardens. Instead, he died, believing I had abandoned him completely. Did you? Abandon him? I told myself I was serving something larger. Queen and country, honor and duty. His laugh was bitter. I was running from his expectations, from this house, from the future that waited here like a cage. And now the cage has caught you anyway. Now I am the cage. He turned, looking down at her. I am the Duke, the title, the responsibilities. Everything I ran from has become everything I am. Vespera closed her book entirely. You are more than a title, Your Grace. Am I? Without the name, the lands, the fortune, what remains? A scarred soldier with nightmares and no capacity for the softer emotions society expects. A man who reads Herodotus for pleasure, who studies maps not from obsession, but from grief, who chose the overlooked girl at the ball because he understood what it meant to be dismissed. She held his gaze. Those things exist regardless of title. The rain intensified outside, drumming against glass with increasing urgency. Inside the library, surrounded by thousands of books and centuries of accumulated knowledge, something shifted between them. You are not what I expected, Theron said quietly. You expected a mouse, someone grateful and silent and easily managed. I expected someone who would make this arrangement simple, transactional, without complications. And instead? He did not answer immediately. Instead, he reached toward a nearby shelf and pulled down a slim volume bound in blue leather. My mother's favorite. Collected poems from a Venetian writer no one remembers anymore. She used to read them aloud when I was young, before she died. My father kept them in his study until the day he passed. He held it out. I want you to have it. Vespera did not take the book. That is too valuable, too personal. Books are meant to be read. This one has been sitting unread for too long. He pressed it into her hands, his fingers brushing hers with a warmth that surprised them both. Consider it a gift for complicated women who make simple arrangements difficult. She looked down at the delicate volume, traced the faded gold lettering on the spine. Thank you, she whispered. Do not thank me yet. His voice had regained some of its edge, but beneath it, she heard something else, something almost like hope. The Havisham Ball is in 3 days. That is where the real test begins. I thought your grandmother was the test. My grandmother is a battle. The ton is a war. And you, Miss Hale, are about to discover whether you can survive it. He turned and strode from the library, leaving her alone with poetry she could not yet bring herself to read, and the lingering warmth where his hand had touched hers. 3 days until the ball. 3 days until everything became real. The Havisham residence blazed with light, every window glowing against the night sky, like a beacon calling ships to shore. Or perhaps, Vespera thought, as the Ashworth carriage joined the queue of arriving guests, calling moths to flame. Breathe, Sabienne instructed from beside her. You look terrified. I am terrified. Good. Terror keeps you sharp. Sabienne adjusted one of Vespera's pearl earrings, a loan from the family collection that probably cost more than her father's entire failed business. Remember what we discussed. You are my dear friend, from a respectable family that fell on difficulties. Anyone who presses for details, redirect with questions about their own concerns. People love discussing themselves. Across from them, the Duke sat in shadow, his expression unreadable. He wore formal evening clothes that made him look less like a feared nobleman and more like a weapon wrapped in silk. Lady Sophronia will be here, he said. Her mother is close friends with Lady Havisham. Expect hostility. I have survived Lady Sophronia's hostility for 3 years. Not as a rival. As a servant, you were beneath her notice. Tonight, you are competition. His cold eyes met hers. Competition she intends to eliminate. The carriage stopped. Footmen opened doors. The moment of safety ended. The grand staircase leading into the Havisham ballroom seemed endless, each step carrying Vespera higher into a world that had never wanted her. Heads turned as they entered. Whispers erupted like brush fires across the crowded room. That is her? The Duke's charity case? I heard she was a scullery maid. Worse, a companion, practically a servant. Vespera lifted her chin and focused on the middle distance, walking as if the whispers were wind and she was stone. The Duke offered his arm at the ballroom entrance. She took it, hyper-aware of the warmth beneath fine wool, the controlled strength in every line of his body. They are staring, she murmured. Let them. Nothing you do will change that. So do exactly as you please. It was strangely liberating advice. The evening proceeded. Introductions blurred together. Lady Havisham herself, examining Vespera with calculating eyes. The Earl of Thornwood, who kissed her gloved hand with unnecessary lingering. Sabienne stayed close, smoothing awkward moments with bright chatter. The Dowager held court in a corner, watching everything with eyes that missed nothing. And through it all, the Duke remained at her side. Not obviously, not in ways that would ignite scandal, but always within reach, always aware of where she stood. The first genuine test came an hour into the evening. Lady Sophronia appeared in a cloud of rose perfume and ivory silk, flanked by 2 companions who had been with her at the selection ball. Miss Hale. Sophronia's smile was exquisite poison. How delightful that you could attend. I see you have found a new position. Congratulations. Thank you, Lady Sophronia. You are too kind. Kindness has nothing to do with it. Sophronia's eyes glittered. I simply wanted to offer my sympathies. It must be so difficult, being displayed like a curiosity for the ton's amusement. Everyone wondering what possible quality the feared Duke could see in someone so thoroughly ordinary. The companions giggled behind their fans. Vespera felt heat rise to her face, but kept her voice steady. Your concern is touching, though I imagine you have your own difficulties to manage. I heard Lord Ashworth rejected your letters with considerable clarity. That must have been embarrassing. Sophronia's smile froze. I do not know what you mean. 14 letters, I believe? In 7 weeks. His Grace mentioned them to the entire ballroom. Vespera tilted her head with false sympathy. One might call that devotion. Others might use different words. Fury flashed across Sophronia's perfect features before she controlled it. Enjoy your moment, Miss Hale. These arrangements never last. And when the Duke tires of his little experiment, you will find yourself without position, without references, without anywhere to go. She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper only Vespera could hear. I will personally ensure that every household in London knows exactly what you are. A desperate fortune hunter who spread her legs to escape poverty. The vulgarity of it shocked Vespera into silence. Sophronia smiled at her expression and swept away, companions following like trailing silk. What did she say to you? The Duke's voice came from directly behind her. She had not heard him approach. Nothing of consequence. Liar. His hand touched her elbow, guiding her toward a quieter corner near tall windows overlooking moonlit gardens. Tell me what she said, and I will ensure she regrets it. No. Vespera turned to face him. This is my battle. You said yourself that the ton is a war. I cannot win it if you fight all my engagements. Something flickered in his expression. Respect, perhaps, or frustration at having his protection refused. You are more stubborn than I anticipated. You are more protective than your reputation suggests. The observation hung between them. Through the tall windows, moonlight silvered his features, softening the harsh lines, revealing the man beneath the armor. "Dance with me," he said. It was not quite a request. People will talk. People are already talking. They will talk regardless of what we do. So we might as well give them something worth discussing. He offered his hand, scarred palm upward. Waiting. Vespera thought of Sophronia's venomous words, thought of the watching eyes and wagging tongues, thought of everything she had to lose and everything she had already gained. She took his hand. The orchestra was playing a waltz, sweeping and romantic, the kind of music that made young ladies dream of love and old ladies remember it. Theron led her to the floor with the ease of someone who had danced at 100 balls, though she knew he preferred battlefields. "You are stiff," he observed as they began to move. "I am concentrating." Stop counting steps and worrying about form. Look at me instead." She raised her eyes to his and felt something shift. The ballroom faded. The whispers receded. There was only his hand at her waist, her palm pressed to his, the intensity of his gaze holding her as surely as his arms. "Better," he murmured. They turned across the floor, and Vespera forgot to be afraid, forgot to calculate how society perceived them, forgot everything except the warmth of his hand and the way he looked at her, like she was the only real thing in a room full of phantoms. "You are staring," she said. "I am observing." "And what have you learned?" He was quiet for a moment, guiding her through a turn that brought them closer together than strict propriety allowed. "That you are braver than you know. That you have been hiding strength beneath that careful invisibility. That I am not certain this arrangement is going to end the way I planned." Her heart stuttered. "What do you mean?" But the music ended before he could answer. They stopped, still close, still caught in whatever had passed between them. The applause of the watching crowd broke the spell. Theron stepped back, bowing with formal precision. "Thank you for the dance, Miss Hale." "Your Grace," she curtsied, hoping her voice did not betray the chaos inside her. He walked away, leaving her standing alone on the ballroom floor, with the eyes of London burning into her skin. Across the room, she caught Sabienne's delighted smile. Further away, the dowager's expression was calculating, unreadable. And in the corner, Lady Sophronia watched with undisguised hatred that promised this war was far from over. Vespera had survived the first battle, but as she touched the place where his hand had rested at her waist, she realized the greater danger was not society's cruelty. It was her own treacherous heart, beginning to feel things that had no place in a temporary arrangement. That night, in her room at Ashworth House, Vespera opened the blue leather volume of Venetian poetry. The first page bore an inscription in faded ink. "For my son, when he is old enough to understand that love is not weakness, it is the only strength that matters." She read the words 3 times before closing the book and pressing it against her chest. Outside her window, rain began to fall. And somewhere in the house, in a study lit by dying candles, the Duke of Ashworth stared at military maps he no longer saw, trying to understand how a simple arrangement had become so dangerously complicated. 3 weeks had passed since the Haversham ball, 3 weeks of social engagements that blurred together like watercolors in rain. The Pemberton Musicale, where Vespera had survived an interrogation by 3 countesses about her family's precise location in the north. Lady Thornwood's garden party, where she had deflected questions about her education with vague references to private tutors and charitable institutions. The Davenport luncheon, where Lady Sophronia had attempted to corner her alone and been thwarted by Sabienne's timely intervention. An endless parade of teas and luncheons and evening gatherings where Vespera played her role with increasing confidence, learning to navigate treacherous social waters without drowning. And through it all, something had changed between her and the Duke. It was nothing she could name directly. He remained formal in public, correct and distant as their arrangement required. But in private moments, in the library, where they now met each evening to discuss the day's events, the walls between them had begun to crumble. He told her about the war, not the heroic version society preferred, but the truth. The screaming horses, the friends who died in his arms, the decisions that haunted him still. She told him about her father's destruction, the night he had come home gray-faced and trembling to announce they had lost everything, the slow dissolution of her family's dignity, the day her mother simply stopped breathing, as if she had decided survival required more strength than she possessed. They traded wounds like secrets. And somehow, in the sharing, the wounds began to heal. Tonight was the Ravencourt Ball, the final major event before the season's end. In 2 weeks, society would scatter to country estates, and Vespera's arrangement with the Duke would conclude. She would receive her references, her connections, her improved prospects. She would leave. The thought should not have hurt as much as it did. "You are quiet this evening." Sabienne appeared beside her in the Ravencourt ballroom, pressing a glass of champagne into her hand. "Usually by now, you have made at least 3 cutting observations about the decor." "The decor is acceptable tonight." "Liar. Those curtains look like something died in them." Sabienne studied her with knowing eyes. "You are thinking about the arrangement ending." Vespera did not deny it. "Have you told him?" Sabienne asked quietly. "Told him what?" "That you have fallen in love with him?" The words struck like lightning. Vespera nearly dropped her champagne. "I have not. That is not. This is a business arrangement." "Vespera," Sabienne's voice was gentle. "I have watched you both for weeks. The way you look at each other when you think no one is observing. The way he smiles, actually smiles, when you are near. The way you light up whenever he enters a room." She squeezed Vespera's arm. "This stopped being a business arrangement a long time ago." Before Vespera could respond, the Duke himself appeared at her elbow. "Miss Hale, I require your presence in the garden." His voice was tense. Something was wrong. She followed him through the French doors onto a moonlit terrace, then down stone steps into a formal garden fragrant with late-blooming roses. They walked in silence until they reached a secluded alcove hidden by hedges from the ballroom's watching eyes. "What has happened?" she asked. Theron turned to face her, and she saw something in his expression she had never seen before. Fear. "My grandmother has discovered something. I do not know what. But she has been in private meetings all day with a man I do not recognize. When I demanded answers, she told me the arrangement would end tonight." Vespera's heart clenched. "Tonight? But we agreed to conclude after the season." "She is not waiting for the season's end. She has found something, some weapon to use against you, and she intends to deploy it." His hands closed around her upper arms, gripped tight with urgency. "I need you to tell me if there is anything at all in your past that could be used. Anything you have not shared." "There is nothing. I told you everything. My father's debts, my mother's death, my brother's struggles. Think harder. A youthful indiscretion, a scandal involving your family. Anything." Vespera's mind raced through her past, searching for secrets she might have forgotten. But there was nothing. Her life had been unremarkable in its suffering. Poverty did not generate scandal. Obscurity did not create gossip. "There is nothing," she repeated. "I swear it." Theron released her arms, running a hand through his hair in a gesture of frustration she had come to recognize. "Then, she is manufacturing something, creating a lie, and finding witnesses to support it. Can she do that? She is the Dowager Duchess of Ashworth. She can do anything she wishes. His jaw tightened. I will not let her destroy you. Whatever she has planned, I will stop it. How? He did not answer immediately. Instead, he stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body, could smell the cedar and smoke that had become as familiar as her own heartbeat. I never intended for this to happen, he said quietly. When I chose you at that ball, I wanted a shield, a temporary solution to an inconvenient problem. I wanted someone who would not matter. The words stung. And now? Now, you are the only thing that matters. His voice cracked on the admission. I have tried to stop it, tried to remember that this was an arrangement, a performance, nothing real. But somewhere between the library conversations and the stolen glances and the way you look at me like I am more than a title with a scar, I forgot to keep my distance. Vespera's breath caught. Theron, I love you. The words came out raw, unpolished, nothing like his usual controlled precision. I love you, and I do not know what to do about it. And my grandmother is about to destroy everything, and I cannot lose you. I cannot. She should have been sensible, should have reminded him of the impossibility of their situation, should have protected them both from a future that could only end in pain. Instead, she reached up and pulled his face down to hers. The kiss was nothing like she had imagined. It was better, desperate and tender and fierce all at once. His arms wrapped around her, crushing her against him like he was afraid she would disappear. She gripped his lapels, anchoring herself to him, to this moment, to the impossible truth of what they had become. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, the moonlight caught the tears on her cheeks. I love you too, she whispered. I have loved you since you gave me your mother's poetry and trusted me with your father's memory. I have loved you since you looked at me across that ballroom and saw someone worth choosing. He pressed his forehead against hers, his hands cradling her face. Then let her come. Let her bring whatever weapons she has found. I will not let her take you from me. She is more powerful than both of us. Power is not everything. He kissed her again, softer this time. I spent 6 years in a war that should have killed me. I survived because I refuse to accept defeat. I will not accept it now. From somewhere inside the ballroom, the sound of raised voices reached them. Something was happening, something that could not wait. Theron's expression hardened into the cold mask she had first seen at the selection ball. Stay here, he said. I will discover what she has done. I am coming with you. Vespera, this is my battle too. Whatever she has created, I will face it beside you. He studied her for a moment, then nodded slowly. Together, then. They walked back toward the ballroom, hand in hand, not caring who might see. The war was about to reach its climax, and neither of them knew if they would survive it. The Ravencourt ballroom had transformed into a theater of destruction. The Dowager Duchess stood at its center, her silver hair gleaming under chandelier light, her black gown making her look like a judge prepared to deliver sentence. Beside her stood a man Vespera did not recognize, thin and sharp-featured, holding a sheaf of papers. And beside him, looking both terrified and triumphant, stood Lady Sophronia. The crowd had formed a loose circle around them, drawn by the promise of scandal like vultures to carrion. Whispers swirled through the air thick as smoke. Forged documents, claiming to be respectable. Her mother was no better than a... The dowager's voice cut through the noise with surgical precision. There you are, her cold eyes fixed on Vespera. I was beginning to think you had fled. It would have been wiser if you had. Theron stepped forward, positioning himself slightly ahead of Vespera. "What is the meaning of this, grandmother?" "The meaning is simple. You have been deceived." The dowager gestured toward the thin man. "Mr. Kavanaugh is an investigator I employed to examine Miss Hale's background. What he discovered is illuminating." Kavanaugh stepped forward, his voice carrying the practiced cadence of a man who had delivered bad news professionally for years. "Miss Vespera Hale presents herself as the daughter of a respectable merchant who suffered financial reversal. This is partially true. What she has concealed is that her mother, before her marriage, worked in an establishment of questionable repute in the northern district of Manchester." Gasps rippled through the crowd. "She was a seamstress," Vespera said, her voice steady despite the ice spreading through her veins. "She worked in a dress shop." A dress shop that served as a front for less reputable activities. Kavanaugh produced a document from his papers. "I have statements from 3 witnesses who remember Mrs. Hale from that establishment. They describe services rendered that no respectable woman would provide. Those statements are lies. Can you prove that, Miss Hale?" She could not. Her mother had been dead for 4 years. The witnesses, whoever they were, could say anything they wished, and there was no one left alive to contradict them. Lady Sophronia stepped forward, her expression a mask of false sympathy. "I tried to warn everyone. I knew there was something improper about her from the moment she entered society. A companion with such airs, such presumption. It was obvious she came from degraded circumstances." "You manufactured this." Theron's voice was ice. "You and my grandmother together. These witnesses are paid liars." "Can you prove that, Your Grace?" The dowager's smile was razor-thin. "Because without proof, the ton will believe what it wishes to believe. And what it wishes to believe is that you have been seduced by a woman whose mother was little better than a common prostitute." The word landed like a physical blow. Vespera felt the blood drain from her face. "My mother was a good woman," she said, her voice breaking despite her efforts to control it. "She worked herself to death trying to hold our family together after my father's failures. She never did anything shameful. Never." "Then explain these documents." Kavanaugh thrust papers toward her. "Explain the signatures. Explain the detailed accounts of your mother's activities before her marriage." Vespera looked at the papers and saw what she expected. Lies dressed in official language. Fabricated histories. Signatures from witnesses who probably did not exist, or had been paid handsomely to remember things that never happened. "I cannot explain lies," she said. "I can only tell the truth." "The truth." The dowager laughed, a cold sound like cracking ice. "The truth is that you are exactly what I always said you were, a desperate girl from degraded circumstances who saw an opportunity and seized it. You targeted my grandson's vulnerability. You performed sympathy and understanding until he believed you genuine. And now, you have been exposed." Theron turned to face the crowd, his voice carrying across the stunned ballroom. "These accusations are fabricated. I do not believe a word of them, and neither should any of you. My grandmother has opposed this match from the beginning, and she has clearly manufactured evidence to destroy an innocent woman." "Then prove it," the dowager said. "Prove these documents are false. Until you can do that, Miss Hale's reputation is destroyed, and any association with her destroys yours as well." Silence fell. Vespera looked at Theron, at the man she loved, at the future she had almost allowed herself to imagine. She saw the anguish in his eyes, the desperate search for a solution that did not exist. She saw the trap closing around them both. "She is right," Vespera said quietly. Theron's head snapped toward her. "What?" "She is right. You cannot prove these documents are false, not quickly enough to matter. And every moment you defend me, your own reputation suffers." Vespera forced steel into her voice. "This is what I always knew would happen. The overlooked girl does not get the fairy tale ending. The Duke does not marry beneath his station. Society does not allow it. Vespera, I release you." The words tore from her throat like shards of glass. "From whatever you thought you felt, from any obligation you believed you owed me, this arrangement is concluded." She turned and walked toward the ballroom doors, the crowd parting before her like water before a sinking stone. Behind her, she heard Theron call her name. She did not look back. If she looked back, she would break. And she could not afford to break until she was alone. The night air hit her face like a slap. She descended the Ravencourt steps with measured dignity, refusing to run, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing her flee. A carriage waited at the end of the drive. Not the Ashworth carriage, a hired hack, shabby and anonymous. She climbed inside and gave an address she had not spoken in months. Then, finally, she allowed herself to cry. Behind her, in the ballroom she had fled, the Duke of Ashworth stood frozen among the wreckage of everything he had almost allowed himself to hope for. His grandmother approached, her expression satisfied. "It is done," she said. "Now we can return to more suitable options. Lady Sophronia remains available, and her family is willing to overlook tonight's unpleasantness." Theron turned to face her, and for the first time in her life, the Dowager Duchess felt genuine fear at what she saw in her grandson's eyes. "You have made an enemy tonight, grandmother, one you cannot defeat. You will forgive me eventually. You always do." "No." His voice was quiet. "Final. This time I will not." He strode from the ballroom, leaving devastation in his wake. The war had been lost, but the battle was not yet over. The rooms Vespera had once shared with her brother felt smaller than she remembered. Cramped and cold, with damp stains on the ceiling and windows that did not close properly. After weeks at Ashworth House, returning here felt like descending into a grave. Eamon found her the next morning, curled in a chair by the dead fireplace, still wearing her ball gown. "Vespera!" He knelt beside her, his face creased with worry. "The Duke's man came yesterday with your belongings. What happened?" She told him. All of it. The arrangement, the growing feelings, the Dowager's attack, the fabricated scandal about their mother. By the time she finished, Eamon's face had hardened into something she barely recognized. "Lies," he said. "All of it. Mother, never. She would never have—" "I know." Vespera's voice was hollow. "But I cannot prove it. No one can. The Dowager has won." "Then we fight back. We find these so-called witnesses. We expose them as the liars they are." "With what resources, Eamon? What connections? We have nothing. We are nothing. That was always the problem." They sat in silence as gray morning light crept through dirty windows. Outside, London continued its endless noise, indifferent to the quiet destruction happening in this forgotten room. A knock at the door made them both jump. Eamon rose, crossing to answer it with caution. In neighborhoods like this, unexpected visitors rarely brought good news. But when he opened the door, the visitor was unexpected in an entirely different way. Sabienne Blackwood stood in the grimy hallway, looking magnificently out of place, in a traveling dress of deep blue, her dark hair escaping from beneath a fashionable bonnet. "Finally," she said, pushing past Eamon without invitation. "Do you know how many addresses I had to try before finding the right one? Your brother moves more often than a traveling circus." "Lady Sabienne." Vespera rose, acutely aware of her disheveled state. "What are you doing here?" "Saving you, apparently, since you seem determined not to save yourself." Sabienne surveyed the cramped room with dismay that she did not bother to hide. The water stains on the ceiling, the threadbare carpet, the single window that let in more cold than light. This was where Vespera had lived before Ashworth House. This was where she had been preparing to return. "Get dressed. We have work to do." "I am not returning to Ashworth House. I am not asking you to. Not yet." Sabienne reached into her reticule and produced a folded letter. "This arrived this morning. It is from a Mrs. Pemberton of Manchester, who read about the scandal in this morning's papers and wishes to offer testimony regarding your mother." Vespera's heart lurched. Testimony? Apparently, Mrs. Pemberton was your mother's employer at the dress shop before her marriage. She is elderly now, but possesses clear memories and documentation that directly contradict the lies the Dowager's investigator presented. Sabienne pressed the letter into Vespera's hands. She is willing to travel to London to speak on your behalf. Why would she do that? Because your mother saved her daughter's life during a cholera outbreak, nursed her through the fever when everyone else had fled. Mrs. Pemberton has been trying to locate your family for years to repay the debt. Sabienne's eyes were fierce. The truth exists, Vespera. It simply needs to be found and presented. Hope flickered in Vespera's chest, painful after the numbness of the previous night. Even if Mrs. Pemberton testifies, the Dowager will claim she is lying. One elderly woman's word against fabricated documents. One elderly woman's word, plus employment records from the dress shop, plus church documentation of your mother's respectable reputation, plus sworn statements from neighbors who knew your family. Sabienne smiled grimly. My brother has spent the past 18 hours mobilizing every resource at his disposal. Investigators, solicitors, clerks dispatched to Manchester on the fastest horses available. By tomorrow, we will have enough evidence to prove the Dowager's witnesses are perjurers. Theron did this. He has not slept. He has not eaten. He has done nothing except work to clear your name. Sabienne took Vespera's hands. He loves you, actually loves you, not as a performance or an arrangement, but truly. And he is fighting for you with everything he has. The question is whether you will fight beside him or surrender to despair. Vespera looked at the letter in her hands, at Sabienne's determined face, at her brother, who watched with dawning hope. She thought of her mother, who had worked herself to death rather than give up, who had sacrificed everything to give her children a chance at something better. Running does not make the wanting go away, a voice whispered in her memory. It just makes you wonder what might have been. What do I need to do? She asked. Sabienne's smile widened into something triumphant. First, get dressed. Then pack whatever you wish to bring. We are returning to Ashworth House, and this time, you are not leaving until we have won. Vespera looked at the cramped room, the dead fireplace, the life she had tried to escape back to. Then she moved toward the small trunk that held her meager belongings and began to pack. The war was not over, or was, and she was done running. Ashworth House felt different this time. Not the intimidating monument to wealth and power she had first entered, not the borrowed paradise she had tried to convince herself was temporary, but something else entirely. A battlefield where allies waited, a home she might actually deserve. Theron met her in the entrance hall. He looked terrible. Dark circles under his eyes, jaw shadowed with stubble, clothes rumpled as if he had not changed in days. But when he saw her, his expression transformed. You came back. Sabienne did not give me much choice. I would have come myself, but I could not leave. The evidence? I know. She told me. Vespera stopped a few feet from him, suddenly uncertain. Theron, what your grandmother did, the things she said about my mother, are lies. We can prove it now. Mrs. Pemberton's solicitor sent documentation this morning. Employment records, character references, even a commendation from the local church for your mother's charitable work during the cholera years. He stepped closer. Your mother was exactly what you always said. A good woman destroyed by circumstances beyond her control. The dowager's witnesses have already retracted their statements when faced with the threat of perjury charges. The relief was so intense, Vespera had to grip the banister for support. It is over? The scandal is over. My grandmother's credibility is damaged, perhaps permanently. Lady Sophronia has been quietly removed from London by her family to avoid further embarrassment. He reached for her hand, his grip desperate. But there is one thing that is not over, that will never be over unless you wish it so. Theron, I love you. His voice cracked on the words. I said it before, in the garden, and I meant it. But I need you to understand that this is not temporary. This is not an arrangement or a performance. When I thought I had lost you, when you walked out of that ballroom, I understood for the first time what my father felt when my stepmother died. What did he feel? That life without her was not life at all, simply existence, gray and meaningless, waiting for death to provide relief. Theron cupped her face in his scarred hands. I do not want to exist, Vespera. I want to live, and I cannot do that without you. Tears streamed down her cheeks, but she did not look away. I am still nobody. Even with my mother's name cleared, I have no fortune, no connections, no standing that society values. Society's values are worthless. I spent 6 years watching men die for values society claimed were important. Honor, glory, duty to the empire. All of it meaningless in the end. What matters is what we choose to value. And I choose you. Your grandmother will never accept me. My grandmother will accept whatever I decide, or she will find herself removed to the dower house with limited allowance and no influence over family affairs. His voice hardened. I am the Duke, the title she has spent decades protecting. If she wishes to maintain any position in this family, she will learn to accept the woman I love. Vespera searched his face, looking for doubt, for hesitation, for any sign that he was caught up in the emotion of the moment, rather than the reality of forever. She found none. I am afraid, she admitted. This world you live in, the responsibilities you carry, the expectations that will fall on me as your wife. I do not know if I am strong enough. You survived poverty that would have broken most people. You endured 3 years of Sophronia's cruelty without losing your dignity. You walked into a ballroom full of enemies and held your head high while they tried to destroy you. He kissed her forehead, gentle as a prayer. You are the strongest person I have ever known, stronger than any soldier I commanded, stronger than me. He kissed her then, properly, deeply, with all the desperate love of a man who had thought he lost everything and found it again. When they finally broke apart, Vespera was laughing and crying simultaneously. Is that a yes? He asked, and there was vulnerability beneath the hope in his voice. You have not actually asked a question. A technicality. But he knelt anyway, right there in the entrance hall of Ashworth House, still rumpled, still exhausted, still the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. Vespera Hale, the one no one chose, the one I chose above all others, will you marry me? Not for convenience or arrangement or social necessity, but because I love you, and I cannot imagine facing another day without you beside me. She looked down at this feared Duke, this scarred soldier, this broken man who had somehow become whole again through loving her. Yes, she said, 1,000 times. Yes. He rose and swept her into his arms, spinning her in a circle, while she laughed with joy she had never imagined feeling. From somewhere on the stairs above, Sabienne's delighted shriek echoed through the house, and in the shadows of the far hallway, the Dowager Duchess watched with an expression no one could read. The confrontation came that evening. Vespera found the Dowager in her sitting room, exactly where she had sat weeks ago delivering warnings and threats. But something had changed in the older woman, a brittleness that had not been there before, a fragility beneath the iron. "May I enter, Your Grace?" The Dowager did not look up from the window. "You have already won. What more could you possibly want?" "To understand." Vespera entered, closing the door behind her. "You could have simply opposed the match, expressed disapproval and let society do the rest. Instead, you manufactured lies about my mother. You tried to destroy not just me, but her memory." "Why?" Silence stretched between them. When the Dowager finally spoke, her voice had lost its cutting edge. "Because I saw what love did to my son. Both times." She turned, and Vespera was shocked to see tears in those cold blue eyes. "His first marriage was suitable. Empty, yes. Unhappy, certainly. But safe. Predictable. He knew what to expect from each day. He functioned. That does not sound like living." "No, but it does not kill you either." The Dowager moved to her chair, lowering herself with the careful movements of age. "His second marriage was love. True, passionate, consuming love. And when she died, it destroyed him. He was never the same. Never whole. He spent his remaining years as a ghost, waiting to join her. And you blame love for that destruction. I blame love for making him vulnerable, for opening wounds that never healed." The Dowager's gaze found hers. "When I saw Theron looking at you, the way his father looked at his second wife, I was terrified. I had already lost my son. I could not bear to lose my grandson the same way." Vespera considered the twisted logic, the misguided protection, the fear that had driven such cruelty. In her own way, the Dowager had been trying to save her grandson from the pain she had watched destroy her son. It was wrong. Deeply, irreparably wrong. But it was not incomprehensible. "So you tried to destroy me before I could destroy him. I tried to save him, the only way I knew how. By lying, by fabricating scandal, by dishonoring an innocent woman's memory." The Dowager closed her eyes. "Yes, and I was wrong." The admission hung in the air like smoke. "I have spent 60 years believing that duty was the only reliable foundation for family. That love was weakness, disguised as strength." She opened her eyes, meeting Vespera's gaze directly. "I watched you walk out of that ballroom, and I thought I had won. And then I watched my grandson look at me like I was something he would scrape from his boot, and I understood." "Understood what?" "That I had not protected him. I had broken him. Again." Tears spilled down the Dowager's weathered cheeks. "He looked at me the way he looked at his father's grave, like I was already dead to him." Vespera thought of Theron's face when he had told his grandmother she had made an enemy. The finality in his voice, the door closing forever. "He will forgive you," she said quietly. "Eventually. Will he? If I ask him to." Vespera stepped closer. "I am not going to destroy your family, Your Grace. I am going to join it. And that means finding a way forward that does not require carrying this hatred forever." The Dowager studied her with something like wonder. "You should despise me. I tried to ruin your life. I slandered your mother's memory." "Yes, and I will not forget that." Vespera's voice hardened. "But I understand why you did it. Fear makes people cruel. Grief makes people desperate. You lost your son, and you were terrified of losing your grandson the same way." She paused. "I lost my mother to despair, and my father to failure. I know what fear does to people. So, what happens now? Now you apologize, publicly and thoroughly. You acknowledge that your witnesses lied, that the documents were fabricated, and that my mother was a respectable woman, slandered by your desperation to prevent this match." The dowager's jaw tightened. "You ask me to humiliate myself. I ask you to do what is right, for the first time in perhaps a very long time." Vespera met her eyes without flinching. "My mother's memory deserves that much. And if you wish to have any relationship with your grandson's future children, you will provide it." The mention of children struck something in the dowager's expression. "Very well." The words emerged like they were being pulled from her by force. "I will make a public statement. I will clear your mother's name. And you will accept me as Theron's wife, not tolerate, accept, with whatever grace you can manage." The dowager was quiet for a long moment. Then, slowly, she nodded. "You are stronger than I anticipated, Miss Hale." "I had to be. Life did not offer alternatives." Vespera turned toward the door, then paused. "Your Grace, your son's second wife, Theron's stepmother. What was she like?" Something that might have been a smile crossed the dowager's severe features. "She was stubborn, outspoken, refused to be intimidated by my disapproval." A pause. "She would have liked you, I think." Vespera nodded once and left the room. The Thornwood Ball was the final event of the season, and all of London society had gathered to witness what everyone knew was coming. The Duke of Ashworth would publicly claim his bride. Vespera stood at the top of the grand staircase in a gown of deep sapphire silk that made her gray-green eyes luminous. Diamonds borrowed from the Ashworth collection glittered at her throat and ears. Her dark hair was swept into an elaborate arrangement that had taken Dinah 2 hours to perfect. She looked like a duchess. She felt like a terrified girl about to jump from a great height. "Ready?" Sabian appeared beside her, radiant in silver. "No." "Perfect. Neither was I, my first season. Terror keeps you memorable." Sabian squeezed her hand. "He's waiting for you at the bottom. Try not to trip on your hem." Vespera descended the stairs, one careful step at a time, acutely aware of every watching eye. The whispers were different tonight, not scandalized or cruel, curious, anticipatory, even in some cases, admiring. The dowager's public apology had done its work. Mrs. Pemberton's testimony had done more. Vespera Hale was no longer the desperate fortune hunter who had seduced a duke. She was the remarkable woman who had endured slander with dignity and emerged with her reputation not just intact, but enhanced. Society loved nothing more than a story of redemption, especially when it came with diamonds. The narrative had shifted overnight, no longer the scheming fortune hunter, but the dignified victim who had stood against slander with grace. Theron waited at the base of the stairs, devastatingly handsome in formal evening wear, the scar on his cheek catching light in a way that made him look dangerous and beautiful simultaneously. When she reached him, he took her hand and pressed a kiss to her gloved fingers. "You look extraordinary," he murmured. "You look terrified." "I'm about to make an announcement that will shock half the ton and scandalize the other half. Terror seems appropriate." Before she could respond, he turned to face the assembled crowd. The ballroom fell silent. "Lords and ladies," Theron's voice carried across the vast space with the authority of a man accustomed to commanding armies. "You have all heard rumors about Miss Vespera Hale, about her circumstances, about her family, about her relationship with me." Whispers rippled through the crowd like wind through wheat. Most of those rumors were lies, manufactured by those who believed they knew what was best for this family. But the truth is simpler, and I hope, more satisfying to those who appreciate such things. He turned to face Vespera, taking both her hands in his. "I chose Miss Hale not despite her circumstances, but because of them. She has known hardship that would have broken most people. She has maintained dignity in situations that stripped others of theirs. She has proven herself stronger, braver and more genuine than anyone I have met in all my years among the nobility. He reached into his pocket and produced a ring, a sapphire surrounded by diamonds, catching the candlelight like captured stars. I love her, completely, irrevocably, and I am asking her, before all of you, to become my wife. He knelt. The Duke of Ashworth, feared throughout society, scarred by war, broken by loss, knelt before the overlooked girl no one had chosen. "Vespera Hale," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Will you marry me?" The ballroom held its breath. Vespera looked at the man kneeling before her, remembered the first night, when he had chosen her from the shadows, remembered the library conversations, and the poetry book, and the first kiss in the moonlit garden, remembered walking away from him, convinced their story was over, remembered choosing to fight for something worth having. "Yes," she said, her voice clear and strong. "I will marry you." He slid the ring onto her finger and rose to kiss her, right there before half of London society. The applause that erupted was thunderous. Sabienne was crying. The dowager stood at the edge of the crowd, her expression complex, but no longer hostile. Lady Sophronia was conspicuously absent, reportedly indisposed at her family's country estate. And Vespera, standing in the arms of the man she loved, finally allowed herself to believe that impossible things could happen, that overlooked girls could become duchesses, that feared dukes could learn to love, that happily ever after was not just for fairy tales. "I love you," Theron whispered against her hair. "I love you too," she whispered back. "Now and always." The music began again, and they took the floor for the first dance of their new life together. The one no one chose had been chosen after all, and that was the only story that mattered. 1 year later, the nursery at Ashworth House had been transformed. Gone were the formal decorations of generations past. In their place, warm colors and soft fabrics, books stacked on every surface, and a rocking chair positioned to catch the morning light. Vespera sat in that chair, a sleeping infant cradled against her chest. Her daughter. Their daughter. A miracle neither of them had dared to hope for so quickly. Footsteps in the hallway announced Theron's arrival before he appeared in the doorway. He had changed in the year since their wedding. The shadows beneath his eyes had faded. The tension in his shoulders had eased. He smiled now, easily and often, in ways that still surprised the servants who had known him before. The nightmares still came sometimes, but now Vespera was there to hold him through them, to remind him that he was home, that the war was over, that he was loved. "She is asleep," Vespera whispered. "She looks like you. She has your stubbornness." They remained there in comfortable silence, watching their daughter dream. A knock at the door interrupted them. The dowager entered, her cane tapping against the floor, her expression softer than it had been a year ago. "I came to see my great-granddaughter," she said. "If I am permitted." "Of course, Your Grace." The dowager approached and looked down at the sleeping infant. "I came to give you something." She produced a small velvet box. It belonged to Theron's mother. I had intended to give it to whoever he married, but when the time came, I was too consumed with opposition to remember. Vespera opened the box to find a delicate pearl bracelet, antique and beautiful. "You have given this family something I never expected to see again. You have given my grandson happiness, and now you have given us a future." She touched the infant's cheek gently. "I was wrong about you, Vespera, about everything. I spent so many years protecting this family from love that I forgot love was the only thing worth protecting." "Grandmother." The dowager cut her off. "You are family now. You should call me grandmother." "Grandmother," Vespera repeated softly. "Thank you." The dowager paused at the doorway. "Her name?" "You have chosen one?" Vespera looked down at her daughter. "Marguerite," she said, "after my mother." The name hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning and memory. Marguerite Hale, the seamstress from Manchester, who had died in poverty, but whose memory would live on in the granddaughter of a duke. Justice of a sort. Redemption. Finally complete. Something glistened in the dowager's eyes. Then she nodded and departed. When they were alone again, Theron knelt beside the rocking chair. "She meant it," he said. "The acceptance. All of it. I know. A year ago, I did not believe this was possible. You, the baby, my grandmother actually behaving like a human being." He pressed a kiss to Vespera's palm. "You changed everything. We changed each other." Outside the nursery windows, spring had arrived at Ashworth House. Gardens that had seemed gray and forbidding now bloomed with color. "Do you remember what you said to me that first night?" she asked. "When you chose me at the ball?" Theron smiled, the expression still unfamiliar, but increasingly natural on his features after so many years of coldness. "I said I wanted the one no one else wanted, the one standing in corners while others paraded. I remember." Vespera looked at him, at this man who had seen her when everyone else looked through her. "Thank you," she said, "for choosing me." Theron leaned forward and kissed her, gentle and sure. "Thank you for letting yourself be chosen." They stayed there as the morning light grew stronger, a family born from shadows and doubt, and the stubborn refusal to accept that love was not for people like them. The one no one chose had found everything she never knew she needed. And every year, on the anniversary of that first impossible ball, they returned to the Ashworth ballroom. They danced beneath the same chandeliers where it had all begun, surrounded by friends and family who had once doubted them. And Vespera always paused by the marble column where she had hidden that night, invisible and overlooked, waiting for her life to begin. She would stand there for a moment, remembering the girl she had been, marveling at the woman she had become. It had begun spectacularly, and it showed no signs of ending any time soon. Thank you for being here. You are the reason these stories exist, because you believe in love that chooses courage over convenience, in characters who fight for happiness despite the odds, in endings that feel earned and true. Your presence makes this space warm and welcoming, and I am grateful for every moment you spend with these characters. Do you have a favorite line or scene? Your engagement helps me understand what moves you, what keeps you listening, and what kinds of stories to create next. Consider subscribing if you would like more romances with emotional depth and genuine character growth. Thank you for being here. You make this community what it is.